Right. Hello again, Jessie. And these questions
Moira.
now, these questions are more specifically about bridges, if you like, into a better economic future for women. Can you tell us a little bit about what successes you've seen in Malawi of women entering, say, business or enterprise? And you were saying earlier in our earlier interview that you were particularly interested in land issues, and that's an issue that's very close to our hearts here in Scotland as well, and about which we have major gender inequality. So you might want to include that. So we're looking at
Okay.
successes that you've seen.
Yeah. No, I think I've seen quite refreshing success stories. And one of the recommendations that I've been giving in all the, be it consultancies or researches, was the need for Malawi to actually popularize these success stories. Because I think when you are in an economic problem like we are in, it doesn't help to focus only on the problems. You must move on and model your response to the problems on your successes. And yes, we have had successes, and especially I will focus on the land successes. One of the things that I've seen that has been very encouraging is that when the rural people have been attacked, have faced land grab problems, they have formed themselves into networks. And the networks they formed, the little groups that they've had, have had very good representation of women. Right now, the bill of land that is under discussion actually says we should have committees, and the committees should have equal gender representation. There will be 3 men and 3 women chosen by the community itself. What I will go on to explain is I'll give you 3 major cases that I have had the pleasure of working with. In Kasinje, there's a that is just there's a community that has won a landmark case. And this was because they were losing land to a church called Good Samaritan. And I know that that sounds very ironical, Good Samaritan Church trying to get land from villagers, but there it was. And what was very poignant about this is that the women, right from the meetings that I held, made a clear link of their loss of land to how that threatens their right to food and their right to health, issues of nutrition, and the whole vicious circle that makes them to end up selling their bodies, which links them to HIV and all of that. When I went into these meetings, I actually have pictures of women saying this land problem actually has a woman's face, because it is us who have to cook. Well, it is us who do the caregiving. But this time around, we are going to be part of the solution. I found that very, very important. Even if you look at our tribunals, when you're talking about conflict resolution, women are very, very well represented. And the reports that you get from bodies like CCJP illustrate that where women have been involved, they've had a very high success rate, because they're able to say, we want to meet the mothers of the people who are taking land from us. We would like to talk to them because we believe as mothers, they will understand where our problems are. So I would say from voicing, from explaining the problem, right from the machinations of peace, let me say the peace architecture that we are working on is very much involving women, and not only women in terms of females as in their biological bodies, but I'm talking about the woman question being put in the forefront, actually saying, how does land threaten, or why should the land question be married with the woman question, which I found very, very important. If you go to the southern part of Malawi, there is an elderly woman who actually passed away after there were chieftains Irangos that were going on, and they ended up losing their land. Now, she was very elderly. She ended up, because she was out in the open for a long time. I went to the community, helped bury her, but her death has actually spared the community for them to seek justice, land justice. And they are now in court. We are trying to fundraise for them to be able to travel, to go to court and come back. Because for them, without their land, they can't even they can't afford a lawyer. So things like finding the legal aid, attending court with them, helping them live day to day. I've had to contact bodies that help in terms of giving social alleviation. So, the third case in terms of women who are doing very well, I would also say it is very important not to essentialize women in Malawi. In other words, reduce them just to the rural. I would also say it is important that we see that we have educated women who actually are fighting for their land too, and showing that land is not important only to the rural, but even to those of us who are in the who are in town and are educated. There are young ladies, and there is a young lady who is actually battling together with the community to keep her land, and this is in Cheu. And what has been interesting is that for her, she was being told that she can't own this land because she's a girl, and ladies should be doing other things. And being a high-profile young lady, it was difficult for her because people didn't expect her to fight for land in her rural place. But what has been interesting is that she has worked with the community and used her networks in order to get people like me involved, but she's in the forefront to go to court and make sure that she brings this issue publicity. We've had press conferences where she has been involved. So that's just about the land. Now, quickly add that, for example, in the extractive industry, we've had women doing very well in terms of mining. And they've bought now is the body for financing women's issues. And I must say that the construction industry has seen a very impressive and encouraging numbers of women who are participating in it. And I think they've really done a lot to empower. And whether you go to our NGO GCN, which is the body where they deal with, they administer the NGOs that are focusing on women, you see that the national construction industry has done very, very well in terms of economically empowering women.
Okay, thanks, Jessie. And for those successes, my question is, what patterns do you see within what are the defining aspects of those that lead to success? Is it the women's awareness and they're taking possession of the issue, like you described in the land issues?
Yeah, I think the patterns that I see, first and foremost, is that, and I will actually start from the construction industry model before I go to the land. I think when women are empowered, when economic empowerment is done from a structural perspective, it works, rather than from a perspective where they are given 10,000 kwacha, 2,000 kwacha for them just to patch. The patchwork doesn't work. It is when they are given substantial amount, and they are also given a empowerment that comes with capacity building. Because what you see in the national construction industry is that they have taken to set up an institution that actually empowers these women on how do you run a business, how do you manage this, how do you present yourself, how do you package what you're doing, and how do you manage your finances. And what I see the pattern is that when the help comes in a way that engraves the woman condition with a structural response to it, it really helps. When women are given large amounts and they are given the support to manage them, and that even includes the ideological, where somebody understands that I am not an apology to this country, I have got personhood, I am an independent person, I should be able to stand on my 2 feet, and if there is a problem, there is a concerted effort of specialists which talk about the problems. I'll be talking about them. For example, the issue of the Women's Bank, I'm going to bring that up. But let me focus on what patterns I see. The other pattern that I think that comes out when I see on the land question is that when we take time to let women speak in their own space and we domesticate their agency. We are able to let them use their own tools. For example, they are speaking their own language, they are using their land, they know which land they were given by their father, their mothers, but their structure is actually domesticated and located in their own space. The agency is I would say globalized, where you have them speaking to the global, but they are using their local tools. I think that works a lot because you actually see a transgenerational link where they talk about what their father, what their mother gave them, and what they want to give to their own daughters and their own sons. And you actually see a mapping of the productive resources being brought in, but they are located within the identity of the family. One thing which I'll be talking about is that one of the major patterns we've seen is that women are battling to map their agency inside the matriarchal and patriarchal definitions of patriarchy that they are meeting. But inside there, they are their own, something which they own. And when they see it, we see things like role modeling, we see things like mentoring coming up, where they are now able to say, so and so did this. And I'll give this a clear example. For example, the very fact that I have been approached as an activist and a woman activist to come and help on land issues illustrates that they are able to look at a woman and say, she will be able to speak to us, and the men are there saying, you led the academic freedom struggle. We believe that you can also lead us in speaking. So they know the role of speaking to the global, speaking to the nation, but at the same time owning the cause. Because they don't come to me and say, I should just pick up the cause and run with it. They own it and they say, what we want is for you to help us open the doors that are available to you. And at the end of the day, it is our issue. We own it and we are going to carry it up to the end. The other patterns that I see coming up a lot is an ability to stand up and understand that they own this country. They need people to save them. You see them often evaluating the traditional leaders and saying, this particular traditional leader is not helping us. They want to sell our land and we don't want to sell land. And if it means removing that leader and replacing another, replacing them with somebody who is pro-land for the poor, they are doing it. So I see a pattern of indigenous forms of power, of leadership, also coming under scrutiny, and the citizens saying, we are able to talk. Why are they able to do this? When you look at the Malawian, most Malawian communities, women were very involved in installing or removing of a chief. They were not at the forefront. That must be clear, because I'm not saying that we had a feminist model of power. No, but I'm saying that in most communities, the women played a very, very pivotal role. Now, when they anchor back to their history, they know that they come from a group of people where women were very powerful, where women were had a voice, and now they are going back to their mother's gardens and now saying, we had our own space. Christianity and global capitalism came and empowered men a lot, but we have our own kind of power too. And I think it has been interesting to see even the men actually carve a very interesting definition of gender equality, gender inequality, where they now say, no, you know, some of them will see me as a man at a certain time and they man once in a while, but at the end of the day you still see that something is happening there, where they are looking at women and seeing that they are women who can get things done. So for me, those are the patterns that are coming out. So that generation, there are also patterns of the genders working together, a coalition of the genders in terms of fighting for land, fighting for resources, fighting for what we need, and seeing each other that power is not a zero-sum game. We can actually work together and end up owning this land. Like the success we had in Kasinji. When we won the case, it wasn't about it's the woman who was leading this fight. It was about this year the Kasinji people will be able to grow their food, they will be able to fight all these problems that were being generated by them not being able to grow. Finally, I'll just quick on this thing, I will quickly say there's also a pattern of a linkage of women's economic empowerment with climate change issues, because most of the land, for example, the Kasinje area, when they couldn't grow any, when they didn't have access to their land or ownership to their land, they had to end up doing bricks, like burning bricks and selling them. They had to cut down trees. And it was very interesting to see that on the day that they won the case, one of the songs they sang is, now we can actually keep our trees. Now we can actually stop burning bricks because we will be able to grow our food. So they see the linkage of how deforestation is a problem. And it is the women who had to go and actually cut trees. Most of the gender-based violence, the rapes, statistics show that they happen in areas where happen on their way when they are going to fetch firewood. So this is whole, it actually constructs a whole discourse where you can see that their being able to generate income somehow makes them less vulnerable to gender-based violence, especially to the rape issues, and makes them be able to keep their trees and fight the whole climate change, adverse climate change that we're having. Yeah, so those are the patterns that I'm seeing.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much, Jessie. And so finally, to wind up our interviews with you, in what way could partners in Scotland, the people who are part of our partnership here in Scotland, help you and your colleagues and support these efforts towards women's economic empowerment in Malawi? Is there anything that we can do to assist, to support?
Yeah. I think one of the things that we are lacking a lot is institutionally to always remember that when we talk of Malawian women, we are not talking of people like me, we're not talking of the President Joyce Banda, we are talking about the majority of people who are in the village, because that's where the majority of women are. In other words, if we are truly committed to helping to economically empowering them, we need to always remember that we need a structural, system-based approach to this. In other words, we cannot have this handout culture that we are seeing, where we see the state probably gathering people and giving out blankets or giving out 5 kg of food, because that's going to help today and not tomorrow. What we want is to invest in girl education. For me, the issue of the making sure that education is something that is not elitist. It is found liberally. I know many people have said, look, once we talk of universal education, what we do, education for people to be employed. Education for the gender question is paramount. Nobody can negotiate HIV, safe sex when you are not empowered. And I think the issue of employment can always needs to be handled, but that should not stop us from making sure that access to education is made as accessible as possible. When we talk about economic empowerment, one of the things we are lacking, we are not making entrepreneurship something that is accessible to young women. We are looking at it as something that people do on retirement, which I think for partners like us in Scotland, one thing that would help us is to respond to economic empowerment in an intergenerational and transgenerational manner, where we actually are bringing in young girls to understand that they can be the Zuckerberg of this world, found food Facebook when you are young and be able to create employment. They don't have to wait until they have gray hairs for them to say, let me get into business. If we are talking about women getting into political events, to getting into politics, the key thing is they have, because if you think of getting it, you have to as a civil servant. I myself am facing that predicament now, where I'm told that, look, if you're interested in being a political figure, you can't do it as a civil servant. In other words, if I resign, then I have to think of how do I eat, what happens to my family. So in other words, I'm saying we need to look at women's economic empowerment from a holistic perspective, because economic empowerment is the bedrock of women being able to negotiate safe sex and get into politics so that they can represent themselves, and so that we end up with a budget that is not a mockery to women's condition like we have. Because right now, when there are very few resources, issues of gender are very poorly funded. But these are the issues that actually decide the lives of young women. So it would be very important to help in capacity. I think capacity building is very, very important. Gender budgeting is something people don't understand. Exactly what is gender? You cringe when you hear people talking. So in other words, the whole issue of helping to develop epistemologies, feminist epistemologies, gender epistemologies. I think in our schools, curriculums need, the curriculum needs to look at this whole issue. We must institutionalize gender inequality. Institutionalize, gender equality knowledge in terms of what is wrong with having a Malawi where women are not equal to men. We need support in terms of the education sector responding to this. Why should everybody be a feminist? Somebody should be able to develop courses on this, right from teacher training college, right to the schools, so that the gender inequality, or let me say the gender equality, becomes a national cause that is owned, that is fought for. It should not be something that is in our plan of 5 years, MDGs, Malawi Development Growth, whatever. It should be in our Vision 2020. And when we are looking at there, it mustn't be a thing for the parties. It should be an issue of the state, something which even when they get it, when this party gets out, the other one comes in, they understand fully that the gender question is not negotiable. It is something that is just there. So, if I was to give a laundry list of how can you help, yes, I think it involves helping in the funding. I think it does involve helping in resources. But I want to emphasize that it needs to allow the rural to speak for themselves and shape the issues that they're going through. And how do they do that? We need to domesticate our knowledge production, even the way they talk. For example, there's the issue of circumcision right now. How do they talk about this? The elections coming out. It would be good if the women in the village are, if somebody funded, this has been always my dream, somebody funded them being able to participate, to have debates where they sit down and talk in their own language. There's this election coming out. What is wrong with being paid to vote for someone? How will that impact you, the one in the village, if someone comes and gives you a 5,000 kwacha and says, vote for me? Let them talk about this. Let's have the trust that when they sit together, as they discuss issues, they will cancel, because I believe it does not have to be in English or be the written word. It is there. The only question is, are we able to tap it and listen to them? Yeah, so the partners, I think if they could help us in increasing moments like this, I really want to say it is not easy for people out there to actually give a chance for a person, a Malawian, to explain issues like the Scottish Partnership has done. And I think it's moments like these that are very important. Actually hear from the horse's mouth speak, where we are able to say, this is what we are facing. We are facing a situation where we've been undressed in our markets. How do we go about this? Because when you come in here and say, this is how to stop getting undressed, they will say it is the Scottish, it's the Scots that are saying it. But when I say it myself and I say, I don't want to be undressed, when you tell me that I should dress like him, tell you that I'm Malawian, but I want to wear a mini skirt. I want to wear trousers, but I'm saying it myself. In other words, I think the Scottish, the partners should help us articulate our own cause. Invest in allowing the local voice to take on this issue and have the trust that if they are in front, then this thing will not have the face of global capitalism or colonialism. It will actually be issues based. Yeah. So for me, I think investing in allowing the local players to speak about this issue and connect with the partners would really help. Advancing education, once again, is very, very important, because I think it allows us to be able to speak as I am doing now. If I wasn't able to read and write and speak English, it would be a problem. But now the challenge is, how do we allow the masses to speak through people like me, for them to speak amongst themselves and be able to translate that to where the resources are, so that at the end of the day, we are not doing secondary harm to them. People like me, I need to be very careful not to end up becoming an oppressor too, by saying this is how we do it. I need to always remember that it is not about me. It is about them saying, we want water here, we want this, and then they should decide for how long and what is it going to help them for. So really enhancing spaces of articulation, I think, will really help, and to go a long way to help us. Yes.
Okay, thank you very much, Jessie. That was very helpful and